This is the BreadWinner Podcast, hosted by entrepreneur, influencer, and sales wolf, Tyler Harris, bringing you the insights from the most successful forward-thinking entrepreneurs and influencers, so that you can rise to the top and make more dough.
Now, let's get into the show.
All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the BreadWinner Podcast. I am your host, Tyler Harris, and we have a special guest on the podcast today, Mr. Carlos Gil. And this one's going to be an interesting one. Normally, this is like just rapid fire questions because it's people that I know better. But I don't know Carlos well. We've just recently started interacting on social and met this past week at Gary Vaynerchuk's event. So I really want to get to know him and figure out who he is, what he's all about. And so what I want to do in the very beginning is just give him the opportunity, tell you who he is, what he does, and kind of where he's showing up in the world. So, Carlos, who are you?
What's going on? Thank you so much, Tyler, for having me on your podcast. In the short time that I've gotten to know you through Agent 2021, I've been following your content. I've been following your podcast. And hey, man, I've got to tip my hat off to you. When I see a fellow person hustling out there to grow their personal brand and doing it in the way you're doing, like, I know you want to interview me, but man, like, let me just throw a spotlight back on you for a moment. You are at a conference in Miami at like 10 o'clock at night doing podcast interviews at a bar. Like, and now I'm not talking about just with your iPhone. You're talking about like full equipment, microphone out. That, my friend, is hustle. So very nice job.
Hey, I appreciate that. It was actually probably the most fun I've ever had. And that's what it's all about, right? Like, this the stuff is supposed to be fun. Like, if you're not enjoying it, then what's the point, right?
Absolutely, man. I always say the key word in social media is social. You have to socialize. You have to have conversations with people. I know a lot of folks out there see this as a quick way to advertise and grow your business and sell. You can do all those things. Don't get me wrong. Like, social media is great from a sales standpoint. But before you get there, you've got to focus on the basics, which is meeting people. And how do you meet people today? It's either A, going directly to them, finding like-minded people to network with, or B, you put out content that resonates with the people that you're trying to attract. And that's how you build your tribe or your community one by one.
So you have done that extremely well, but it seems like you've obviously got one area of focus. It's what I've seen you, and just so you know, because this is always interesting, I think we were talking earlier about people that kind of stalk you online before they actually meet you. But I've been following your stuff for a long time, and I've seen all these different places that you've been talking about Snapchat. And I just thought it was so awesome because literally we live in a age where you can travel all over the world and talk about Snapchat. And so talk a little bit about that, because quite frankly, becoming a expert in a particular space, like, I've been telling people, like, hey, I'm talking to Carlos, he's like the Snapchat dude, like, he's the king of Snapchat. And I don't even use Snapchat really. Like, I just added you like 2 seconds ago just so I could see if there was anything I could check out real quick. So like, talk about that a little bit, about kind of how that all got started and kind of what you're doing.
No doubt. Well, I'm glad that we're starting off talking about Snapchat, because a lot of folks out there, I think they associate me with being a one-trick pony in terms of someone that is just proficient in understanding Snapchat. And when you really peel back the layers of the onion of who is Carlos Gil, I've been working in social media since 2008. And something that a lot of folks that follow me today that haven't necessarily been following me since 09 and 10 and 11 is that I used to be a banker. I actually started my career in financial services, and I worked in banking from the years of 2002 all the way on up to 2008. And if you recall what happened here in the States in 2008, the recession hit. I was out of a job. At the time, my wife was 8 months pregnant with our daughter, and I don't have a college degree. In fact, I didn't finish high school. Wow. So I didn't have the personal brand that I have today to fall back on. I didn't have a plan B when I lost my job in the banking industry. I was really forced to do what a lot of folks in recent times have had to do, which is dust yourself off and use social media to network and build a brand. And in doing so, I actually started my first company at 25 years old, which is back then. It was called Jobs Direct USA. And the reason why today I'm able to master, quote unquote, social media in the way that I do is because everything I do today I was doing in 2008, 9, 10, and 11 with zero marketing budget. I forced myself to learn how to growth hack the shit out of Twitter, how to use Facebook, how to write press releases and pitch to media. So when you look at a platform like Snapchat, the reason why I was one of the first marketers on Snapchat is because I've always been one of those entrepreneurs or marketers that is constantly pushing myself to look at what's next, what's coming down the pike. And I share with you, Tyler, as soon as a platform becomes overly crowded and noisy, immediately I'm looking for where can I capitalize and get the most attention possible, where people are paying attention, maybe not at a level of like Instagram right now or Twitter per se. So when I got on Snapchat in 2013, there wasn't a lot of folks out there talking about business. There weren't a lot of marketers. There weren't a lot of content creators. In fact, Snapchat back then was a platform used primarily by teens. And the first year that I was on Snapchat, I only followed 5 people. To be honest with you, I use Snapchat primarily from a research and development standpoint. And I'm a big proponent with using social media for research and development, and especially emerging platforms. Before you can come out on the scene and say, hey, this is going to be the next thing that pops, jump on, you need to actually see how it works. So fast forward to the years of 2014 and 15, before Gary Vee jumped on, there was Carlos Gil that was teaching marketers how to go ahead and use Snapchat from a marketing standpoint. I know there's people watching right now. I'm doing a Facebook Live and Instagram Live, and a lot of folks in the marketing community used to say, hey, Snapchat's crap, and it's never going to catch on as a marketing platform. And I found this to be a way to separate myself from a lot of those colleagues. And it became a way that I was able to expand my network beyond Facebook, beyond Twitter. So what I'm trying to say in a long roundabout way is if you want to grow your brand on social media, you have to take risks. You can't just be creating content on the same platform as everyone else. So if there is something that is new that you can potentially tap into, my advice is give it a shot, because you have nothing to lose and you have all to gain.
I love that. That was the best explanation that you could have possibly given. And it provided great context for me because I didn't know that about your past. And I love hearing that. So basically what you're saying, and Gary Vaynerchuk talks about this a good bit, and I always love when people push him on this, when they talk about new platforms and, who has time for, all these different platforms that are coming out and this and that. And he's like, how do you have time not to? Like, yeah, you could spend 6 months on this platform, but what if it's the next one that completely takes off? And like you were an early adopter and you're able to ride that wave versus not doing so. Like, there's only so many opportunities you have to be an expert in anything. So you have to be willing to try.
Absolutely. I've been doing public speaking since 2014, and my speaking career really didn't take off until a couple of years ago, when that Snapchat wave was really as high its peak. And guess what happened? There was conference organizers that were looking for marketers that understood Snapchat because it was hot. It was what they would hear. And something I want to point out is the same way that you've got to jump on something because it's new is the same way that you have to know when to jump off and when you have to pivot. Yep. And, I know there's folks out there listening to this. There's folks that are watching this also. So I have to be very careful how I phrase this, but your community is your community. Just because you have a presence on Snapchat, if Snapchat goes away, doesn't necessarily mean that your community goes away. You have to constantly be speaking to your community across platforms. I often talk about being omni-channel present. So the same way I'm passionate about Instagram right now because I know it's hot and I know I can get an extra 1,000 views on there if I post content, is the same way that I'm going to go on Twitter and I'm going to engage with people because I know the way Twitter works. It's not necessarily a content marketing platform, but it's more of a conversational marketing platform. And that's the key, Tyler. And that's why I said before, I don't want folks to think of Carlos Gil's brand as being the Snapchat guy because it's very easy to get pegged and be viewed as that one-trick pony. I want people, when they think of Carlos Gil, here's a guy that has 10 years of corporate marketing experience to understand social media inside and out. If you need me to talk to you about Facebook ads, let's talk about Facebook ads for the next hour. If you need me to talk about LinkedIn, great, let's talk about LinkedIn. The key difference between marketers and practitioners and everyone else is those that are practitioners actually put into practice and they're willing to go ahead and take risks on these platforms and they're testing out what works. All of these social networks are different. Not one social network is created equally. So the way that you're going to use Facebook is going to be completely different than the way that you're going to use Instagram and YouTube and on and on.
So have you copyrighted that omni-channel present?
I should. I should.
Man,
I should.
is...
I've been talking about this. I've been talking about this for a minute. And let me tell you something. I tell content creators this all the time. Don't call yourself a YouTuber. Don't call yourself a Snapchatter. Don't call yourself an Instagrammer. You are a content creator. It's like saying an actor, right? You don't hear an actor say, I'm only a TV actor or I'm only a motion picture film actor. You're an actor. You have a talent. You have a skill set. Same thing in the creator community. Same thing in the entrepreneurial business community. You are what you are. These platforms, at the end of the day, all they are is a distribution medium to help you get your content, your message out there.
Absolutely. So I want to take it back a little bit. And right in the very beginning, you mentioned how you were a banker. 2007, 2008 hit. Obviously, everything crashed. That period of time, it sounds like, was your biggest growth period in trying different things and figuring out who you are. For me, that was my same story. I became a financial advisor and went through all the licensing, all the training, and my first day on the job was December of 2007. And then the market crashed. But it built the most solid resiliency ever, because while everybody was freaking out and financial advisors were hiding under their desks, not answering their clients' phone calls, I was out knocking on doors in neighborhoods saying, hi, I'm Tyler Harris. I'm a financial advisor with such and such firm down the road. And just started having these conversations because the vast population was terrified because everything was going crazy. Their financial advisor wasn't picking up the phone, and I'm there knocking on their door just asking if I can help in any way. And it was the single greatest, in my opinion, land grab of money in that time to bring in accounts from other advisors. Everybody else, financial advisor-wise, saw it as the worst possible time to start a business as a financial advisor. So it's all about their perspective, and I love how he said that. Now, one of my favorite quotes ever is that every successful person has a painful story. And I added on to that will your painful story have a successful ending? So I would love for you to take it, and if it's further back or if it's somewhere in between, I'd love for you to kind of be a little vulnerable here and talk about a painful time, but a time that made you who you are today and that now you are so grateful for having gone through it.
Well, I say a couple things really are what come to mind for me. And one, that's the fact that at the age of 17, I made a decision to drop out of high school. So I'd gone to 3 high schools in a 3-year period, and I just moved back to Florida from Utah at the time. And I made a decision to drop out of high school and to go sell shoes for a living. And not for nothing, I grew up in a very affluent, well upbringing. My parents did a very good job raising me, but I was one of these kids that was rebellious. I grew up in the late 90s, early 2000s, and I was just a rebellious kid, and I didn't enjoy school. And I felt that by me working, I would be able to acquire a skill set that would take me, a lot higher in life than being in a classroom. I'll give you an example. When I was in high school, I worked 2 jobs simultaneously. I worked for Blockbuster Video 20 hours a week, and then I sold shoes for another 20 hours as well. So I had 2 jobs, and I worked 40 hours a week, 2 part-time jobs to work 40 hours in high school. So I wasn't asking mom and dad for gas money to take a girl out on a date. I was able to provide that for myself. And I took pride in that. And in doing so, in working as a 16, 17-year-old, what did that do? It helped me develop people skills. I'm an only child. And a lot of folks would never know this about me, but I'm very much an introvert. You guys see what I do online, and it's the hey Snapchat fam and high energy and all that's great. And you see me on stage and I love what I do. But at the same time, I'm a shy person. Like naturally, I'm not the person that's going to walk into a room and start shaking everyone's hand. That's just not who I am. I'm shy. I'm a true introvert. So working at a young age helped me develop those soft social skills that I think social media, or not that I think, I know for a fact social media cannot replace. You have to go out and meet people, develop that. But where I'm going with this is as I was starting to make my own money, I was starting to learn things like sales, and working in retail, you start learning about the operations in retail. I was thinking, I'm not acquiring this knowledge in school, like in art class, learning about Michelangelo and learning about, Beethoven in music class. Like that's not going to help me in life. That's just a reality. Doing algebra is not going to help me in life. So I dropped out of school. And where I'm going with this is it was a very tough decision. I recognize probably the first 12 to 13 years of my adult life, because everywhere I went, not having that college degree ended up closing a lot of opportunities for me. And I say this very humbly, that I've been turned down for more jobs than I've ever interviewed for. I've lost more business than I've ever pitched. And a lot of that has to do because I can't check off that box. Now, that was probably from the age of, 17 all the way up onto 30. Once you hit a certain, stage in your life and your career, now the education matter as much as the real world experience and being able to walk in front of someone and say, this is what I've done. Like, you can bullshit your way a lot through your career. You can't bullshit through what you've done. Yeah. And actually when you can show results. So that's one, is not having, on paper, the education. That was a very, very hard lesson learned. In fact, it's something I'm going to be probably writing about a lot more. I'm going to be talking about it a lot more. So if there's any listeners or viewers out there that really want to hear more about my story because they can relate, please feel free to reach out to me. The second is actually during the recession. I went bankrupt. I went broke. My cars got repossessed. My home got foreclosed all the time. I literally am someone that could say at one point in my life, very, young as an adult, 26, had zero money to my name. And I know there's people out there that are probably like, holy shit, that's, ballsy for you to be able to admit that. But what happens, Tyler, is when you're able to come onto the other side of that, thank God, knock on wood, I'm not in that position anymore. But when you get on the other side of that, you're legitimately able to look back and say, wow, I survived things that other people have committed suicide over, things that have led to addiction problems. For a lot of people out there, I've actually been able to overcome those shortfalls in my life and get to a point where I can now teach people. So trust me, dude, when you're at a point where you've got no money to your name, you will hustle. And when I talk about hustle, I'm not talking about like dealing drugs or anything like that, but I'm talking about like literally you start going through every person in your LinkedIn network and you're literally sending emails and knocking on doors, trying to see who you can work for. I'll never forget this, at this point in my life where I didn't have a lot of money and people didn't know who I was. Back then, when someone would hit me up and say, hey, we've got a little social media gig for you, it's going to pay you $200. Dude, I remember pulling over the car and literally processing PayPal transactions just for those $200, man. Oh, yeah. And I'm going to share a very quick story with you here and anyone that's listening and watching. So, the job that kind of put me on the map corporate wise was Winn-Dixie. Winn-Dixie is one of the largest supermarket chains in the Southeast. In fact, you live in South Carolina, so I know that you've heard of Bilo, which owns Winn-Dixie. Absolutely. So I started social media for Winn-Dixie in 2012. That was my first corporate marketing job. Now, in order for me to get to Winn-Dixie's head of recruiting on one day in 2010 hit me up on LinkedIn. I'll never forget this. This is a woman that came to one of my job fairs a year before when she was unemployed. Now she was employed running recruiting for Winn-Dixie. She came to one of my job fairs. She hits me up on LinkedIn a year later and she says, hey, we are doing a job fair on Monday. She hits him up on Friday afternoon and says, we are doing a job fair on Monday and it's too late for us to run an ad in the Jacksonville Business Journal or with the Florida Times Union, which is the newspaper in Jacksonville, Florida, where I lived at the time. She goes, how much can we pay you to promote our job fair on social media? Now, most people on a Friday afternoon, 5:30 p.m., when you've got your wife and you've got your kids wanting to go to Chili's or wanting to go to dinner, they're going to be like, you know what, deuces, I'll deal with this on Monday. Yeah. Once again, when you've got no money to your name and you are literally broke and you need money, you will stop what you're doing and you will work for a couple $100. I threw a random number out there. I said, you know what, I will promote your job fair for $300. I literally spent an entire weekend promoting Winn-Dixie's job fair on every single message board you can think of under the sun, pitching the media on Twitter, promoting, spamming the shit out of everyone you can imagine. And, it's funny because to this day, people call me a spammer because I post my content everywhere. But, dude, if you want to be seen, you have to make yourself seen. Yep. Like, unless you're at a Gary Vee level or a Ty Lopez level where you have an army of thousands promoting your content, you've got to make yourself seen. Yep. So where I'm going with all this is Monday rolls around. I spent an entire weekend promoting Winn-Dixie's job fair. Winn-Dixie had more professional candidates. And when I talk about professional, people in suits and ties, they had more professional candidates show up to their store for like 20 management positions than they had ever seen. What happened from there is Winn-Dixie gave me a contract. It was one of the first contracts that my company, Jobs Direct USA, ever landed with a major enterprise brand. And then what happened after 2 years, they offered me a 6-figure job to go work for them. Wow. So think about this. A Friday afternoon LinkedIn message that I could have completely ignored for a couple $100 ended up turning into, at this point, I can honestly say this. If anyone wants to call me out on it, I have no problem showing you tax returns. I probably made at this point close to 7 figures, okay, in corporate salaries off of that one LinkedIn InMail. I know it's a lot.
Dude, there's so much I want to unpack there. And I hate that this is, I'm going to have to get you on the Sales Wolves podcast because that's my like hour long, like more in depth. This one's so much shorter. There's so much I want to unpack there, but dude, thank you first and foremost for sharing all that. This is the best type of content that people need to hear. Like, I love the fact that, you know, with Lewis Howes' new book and all these, it's kind of this trending of vulnerability being the new strength. Like, I'm so ready for people to actually start talking about what's really going on. And thank you for being transparent there. I love that. But the funny thing is, like, so you answered that one message, but it was a year prior that set up that message, wasn't it? Isn't that what you said, that she met you like a year prior before sending you the message?
Absolutely. My toughest year professionally and personally was 2009.
Yeah.
2009, I didn't make any money. Nothing. Literally had to liquidate my 401k at the time, sold all my stocks, got to the point where I had no money. So 2009, it was all about business development. It was all about building that brand. It was all about adding value, as we call it, with nothing in return. And I was doing a lot of free events. And trust me, people told me I was nuts. A lot of people said, dude, you're crazy. You've got family support. But I believed in myself. Yeah. When no one believed in me, I believed in myself. And dude, if it wasn't for that opportunity, I probably wouldn't have the career that I have today.
That's awesome, man. I want to ask you one last question. And before I do that, I want to kind of in a backwards way, ask you if it's what you shared with me about some stuff coming soon with you and somebody else. That's public knowledge?
With me and someone else.
And the person you were with at dinner and when you sent me the message and...
Having a baby? Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, got it. Dude, I didn't want to call you out right now like on live and be like, hey, when your son... like,
all these folks here know.
Good. All right, good. Just wanted to make sure. Like, I was like, that'd be the worst thing I could have ever done. So one day, let's call it 30 years from now, your son is explained to someone who their dad is because you're still alive and thriving. But what do you want them to say? Like, what's the one word that you would want that son of yours to describe you?
I would say I would want, because I've got a lot of kids.
Yeah.
So this isn't my first. I would say I want all my kids to look back at their dad and say, wow, my dad was able to literally turn lemons into lemonade.
Perfect. I love that, man.
Because life will hand you lemons, and there is no Harvard degree, there's no Emory University that's going to teach you how to turn lemons into lemonade. They'll give you some good content in the books, but they're not going to teach you how to deal with real life.
And guys, if you're listening to this podcast, please go follow Carlos. He's about to tell you where you can do that. But the reason you need to do that is because it's real. Like, it's the real story, the struggles, the good, the bad, the ugly. That's the only people I want to associate with. Like, I don't want anybody that just puts up this facade, this fake filtered, everything's good. Like, it's enough. Like, we've seen enough of that. I want real people telling the real story, that it's hard work over a long period of time and taking risks, being willing to go all in. Like, that's what people need to follow. So where can they find you online?
You know what? You can go to my website, which is carlosgil.biz. You can find all my social media accounts there. You can also find me at carlosgil83 on virtually everywhere, Twitter, Instagram, you name it.
Got it. So we will definitely continue this conversation another time on the Sales Wolves podcast. But, man, Carlos, I appreciate you taking the time. I love the backdrop there. You do have the Snapchat, like, right behind you. But I now know what to call you, and that is the content creator, and I appreciate you so much for being on, man.
Absolutely. I appreciate you too.
So with that, guys, that is the BreadWinner podcast. Mr. Carlos Gil stopped by and dropped some truth bombs on everybody. Look forward to talking to everybody soon.
Thank you for listening to the BreadWinner podcast. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast and leave a rating on iTunes. For a chance to be on the show, send a screenshot of your iTunes rating to @TylerHarris page on Instagram, where he'll pick one person every single week. See you next time on the BreadWinner Podcast.